Ladies and gentlemen, this was the most difficult portrait I have ever done. And why? I will explain in a bit. The reason I'm doing this video is that I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I made, and also I wanted to show you how I found the solutions to the challenges that I faced. You might find them helpful. 10-hour-long full tutorial of this portrait is available on my Patreon, patreon.com/Ece Gurler, and if you want to look at the list of my Patreon tutorials, they are on my website, ecegurler.com/Patreon. I have always been a Sherlock fan and I wanted to be in his adventures. I guess I created my own. Then join me. First, I analyzed a reference photo. I was trying to see what the most challenging parts are going to be. His hair was curly, especially this part will need some strategy. He had wrinkles around his eye and on his forehead. His scarf had a lot of folds, and the coat pattern was something that I had never tried before, so I had to think about a strategy for that as well. Then his eye. When I zoomed in, I couldn't see any details due to the low resolution, so I went online and searched for other Benedict Cumberbatch photos. This one was okay, but couldn't see any details here either. But at the next one I tried, I got lucky. Now I could see his eyes and every detail of it. The next step was to decide on my colors. Once I picked those colors with the eyedrop tool on PowerPoint, the final step of my preparation was creating the initial sketch. I used grid method as I wanted to be really accurate. The very first problem I had was the difficulty of erasing. Normally, when I go in with my eraser pencil, it erases really well, but not after I burnish or applied so many layers. The more layers it has, the harder it gets to erase. Even I tried my vinyl eraser, which literally erases everything, but no luck. The best result I had came with this beauty, electric eraser. It erased so well that I was shocked. It was amazing. No matter how many layers I had, it erased so well. So for me, that was the best one that worked on color pencils so far. Even I did crazy corrections, fearlessly. Just like this one. Don't worry, it all went well in the end. I just covered it with more hair and it was great. The second hardest part was the wrinkles. He had a bunch of them. No matter how deep the wrinkle is, we need to make sure that we are not applying pressure on our pencil. The wrinkles should have a fading end point to look natural. And in order to give them a more natural look, we have to make sure that our pencil is sharpened and we make those lines with tiny circular motions. Just like here. The wrinkles on the forehead were the deepest and longest ones. As you will see here in a second, again, I drew these lines with calm circular motions. They are not super straight. They have ups and downs that we should definitely not forget. In the middle, it gets deeper, which means we have to make it darker. After drawing these wrinkles, we need to blend them or burnish them to give them a more natural look. Here I used brown ochre 10%, which is a very nice yellow tone. It really softened all these lines and it made it look like they're actually a part of the skin. Blending or burnishing after creating wrinkles is a very important step that we shouldn't skip. Oh, this part was frustrating. Ear in the photo was so dark that I couldn't get that dark with my sepia. So I'm like, what about I used black? I usually don't use black in my portraits. I'm like, what the heck? I'm gonna use black. Boy, was I wrong. So when I burnished it, then it became so muddy and the colors looked so dirty that I couldn't take it anymore. So I had to erase it and then paint it back with my sepia instead. So that was a trial and error, right? But did I learn my lesson? No. I used the same black in the shadow part of the color, and again, when I blended it, it looked so dirty. Now I learned my lesson. The folds are challenging because they change tones as they fold. So we need to give the shadow and light effect by using our colored pencil. How do we do that? For darker shadowed areas, we apply more layers and pressure. We release the pressure as we move towards the highlighted area. As you see here, I worked in sections. It helped keep me sane. One trick was that I had to sharpen my pencil a lot, like a lot. In order to save some time, once I finished the darker to lighter shading, using the same color, I apply a very light layer by holding my pencil from the very back, and then I go in with my solvent. And don't forget to blend everything in the linear direction of the folds. And also you will realize that solvent will darken up your color. This coat pattern gave me a lot to think about. I tried everything, but I couldn't figure out how to do these light brown spots on the black background. Then I came up with my own solution, a series of triangles. This was my own pattern. I used both black and brown. Then I tried two different ways to blend. The solvent smudged them too much. Also, it almost lost the pattern. But when I tried blending stump, it was perfect. This is how I decided on what to do, by trial and error on a different paper. As you can guess, this process took me a long time, but it was totally worth it. I highly recommend you to do these kinds of details with an oil-based color pencil. I used my Faber-Castell Polychromos here. The reason is you can get really fine point with them, and also they are much harder, so making these lines gets easier. Plus, they blend super well with blending stump. I have added the shadows after I added the pattern, which was super stressful. So on the left, I decided to do shadows first and then do the patterns. Well, this gave me less amount of stress, and I think the result was the same. So I highly recommend you to put in your shadows first and pattern later. Unless you haven't noticed, Benedict Cumberbatch has a lot of hair, and curly ones. Here in the curliest part, I basically did some swirls with my colored pencil, black and brown. I did not apply any pressure at all, and I continued my swirls. And afterwards, I blended them with a solvent, which kind of filled the whites in between. While working on the hair, I always recommend you to work in sections, but I never explained you what those sections are, right? My bad. Now I'm going to explain. So here are my sections. So instead of focusing on the whole hair first, we just focus on the sections. We just focus on the limited area as the first step. I just can focus my attention better, and also it lessens my anxiety. Once all these small sections come together, then you have the hair. Well, Sherlock Portrait had required me to do many different kinds of blending techniques, and I did make mistakes. For example, do you see how dark in the shadow the cheek is? But then I was doing it right here, and it was pretty good, pretty dark, but for some reason I burnished it with an off-white color and it got much lighter. Big mistake. I didn't make the same mistake here though, and I burnished it with the Burn Ochre 10%, which is a tone of yellow. Do you see the tone difference? A blending stump is another method. By the way, I talked about 6 different techniques to blend colored pencils before. If you haven't checked it out yet, I am putting it up right here for you. Here, the black hair lost its saturation when blended with blending stump. But here, you notice that solvent actually made the opposite. It makes the colors more vibrant. I think my favorite was the colorless blender. I used it as the last touch and oh my goodness, it created such a difference. It blended all these undertones and shadows so well, and despite the fact that I had already burnished them. The biggest difference it made was on the hair. Let me show you a before and after video. This is before. Do you see the white of the paper is showing in the hair? And this is after. See, it got a much better blended result. I wasn't able to do this with the blending stump. Also, the colorless blender helped a lot for my 4th and 5th layer on the scarf. Just don't forget to apply it in the linear direction of the folds. It's much better that way. This is before the blender, and this is after I blended with the colorless blender. Perfect, isn't it? Isn't that awesome? So, this was the result of my 10-hour marathon. I hope you enjoyed it. Probably you noticed the shine, by the way, it's because of the wax. Think of it as graphite pencils. They naturally shine under very bright light. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye! Thanks for watching my video. If you like my videos, please don't forget to subscribe. And for my real-time narrated tutorials, visit my Patreon, patreon.com/Ece Gurler. Stay with art and love.